Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast. I am your host, Sarah, and I am so excited for today's episode because we have another author interview, and I am loving doing these author interviews. It's so fun, A, to read books that I might not otherwise have gotten to read, and B, to talk with really interesting people who love books and who love to write and who love to read, and this interview is no exception. So before we get to the interview, we'll be talking a little bit about the book, and that book is The Wild Woman's Guide to Traveling the World by Kristin Rockaway. The blurb on the back says, "Objectively, Sophie is a success. She's got a coveted job at a top consulting firm, a Manhattan apartment, and a passport full of stamps. It isn't quite what she dreamed of when she was a teenager, dog-earing pages in exotic travel guides, but it's secure. Then her best friend bails just hours after they arrive in Hong Kong for a girls' trip, and Sophie falls for Carson, a free-spirited, globe-trotting artist. He begs her to join him on his haphazard journey, but she chooses responsibility and her 5-year plan. Back in New York, that plan feels less and less appealing. As Sophie recalls the dreams she suppressed, the brief international jaunts she sneaks in between business trips no longer feel like enough. Carson isn't ready to let her go either, but as they try to figure out their relationship, Sophie realizes she may have to pursue her passions with or without him. So this is a really fun book. It actually comes out on June 6th, so it comes out next Tuesday. It is a lot of fun. It is a bit of a travelogue as she goes to Hong Kong and Macau, and you get to catch glimpses of culture and life in those places. You get to see New York through Sophie's eyes and through Kristin's eyes because she grew up in Brooklyn. So you get to see New York through her eyes, through Sophie's eyes. Kristin actually says in the interview that she sees Hong Kong and New York as characters in this book. So that's something to look at. It is a romance. There is obviously the romance between Sophie and Carson. So it is a romance, and it does explore some of those tropes that are common to the romance genre. But it's also, we talk a little bit about the terms beach read and chick lit and how those can have some derogatory connotations in the book world. But this really is a book about a woman's journey to discovering what she truly wants in life. You know, it's to her journey to finding the balance between her 5-year plan, between being that practical, goal-oriented woman and chasing her dreams, chasing her passions. So trying to find that balance and figuring out what is it that she really wants in life? What is it that will truly make her happy? Is it that 5-year plan? Is it that stability of the successful job and the very nice paycheck? Or is there something missing? Is there something that she needs to explore further? So throughout the book, she explores further. There's a little bit of exploration also on Carson's part as he figures out what he wants. It is told from Sophie's perspective, so it's written in first person. So we get more of Sophie's ponderings and her discernment throughout this process. But I really enjoyed the book. It's a great summer read. It's a great book to throw into your bag and take on vacation with you. If you're going somewhere, take it and just escape a little bit. Even if you're not going on vacation, use this book as a mini vacation if you can't get away right at this point in the summer. So I loved the book, and I'm excited for you to hear my interview with author Kristin Rockaway. So without further ado, let's go to that interview.
Hi, Kristin. Thank you so much for joining me and agreeing to be on the podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to chat.
I'm excited to chat with you as well. To get started, I would love for my listeners to just get to know you a little bit, whatever you're comfortable sharing about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So just a little overview. I'm a native New Yorker. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. Lived in the borough my entire life. So about 8 years ago, I got married like about 11 years ago in New York, and my husband and I just kind of wanted a new adventure. So we packed up our car and drove cross country and decided to start over in sunny San Diego, which is way different from Brooklyn. But I'm loving it. No snow, so that's a plus. And I currently spend my days just writing. I do freelance work as well as my fiction. And I'm raising my 4-year-old son by the beach and loving it.
What do you miss most about New York?
Oh, the food. Hands down the food. Yeah. Like, you can't get the same sort of like diversity in ethnic food. Like I'm Italian, and you can't really find good Italian food out here. And also just sort of the ability to just kind of get something in a moment's notice. Like I just want to order in, and places close down real early. I also kind of miss the culture, and just there's something going on every night, like every day in New York. And here you just kind of have to look a little bit harder to find it. But at the same token, like I love the sort of slowed down pace of life,
We'll talk a little bit about your writing now. Is writing something you've always wanted to do? When did you begin writing?
Oh, yeah. I've wanted to be a writer for as long as I can remember. It was kind of like my when I grow up dream, like when I grow up, I'm going to be a writer from when I was little, as I can remember. But, life kind of got in the way. I decided that it wasn't really a safe choice for me. And so I pursued more practical options. I majored in computer science and I became a programmer, which, I didn't hate it. I liked it. It was fine. But, it didn't really fill that need in my soul that writing filled. But I always kept kind of writing for myself on the side. I'd write like in my journal, I'd write little blog posts, little stories just for me, And then 4 years ago, I had my son, and that kind of changed everything. Because anyone who has a kid kind of knows that you just don't have time. If you're working full time and you have a child, like there's just no room to kind of pursue the things you love on the side. There's just no free time. So I really didn't have much time to write. And after a while, that kind of weighed on me. And when my son was 18 months old, I decided to quit my job. I was like, I'm just going to take 6 months off and devote it to my writing. It was kind of for my mental health too. And that was 2.5 years ago, and I never went back, and now I've got a book out in the world.
That's awesome. About that book out in the world, so it's The Wild Woman's Guide to Traveling the World, which is a very fun mouthful of a title. Do you want to, let's talk a little bit about that. Give us a brief synopsis of the story.
Yeah, sure. So it's about Sopie Bruno. She's this 20-something career girl living in New York City. She's an overachiever. She's a planner. She's got her life perfectly ordered. Like, she's got it all figured out. She's going to get her MBA, and she's going to work her way up the corporate ladder. And she has this passion for traveling the world. But, she's had some things happen to her in her life where she really craves stability. So she takes this job as a traveling IT consultant because to her, she feels like that's the best of both worlds. Like, she gets her big paycheck, she gets her steady employment, she can, get this plan for her life that that she wants or that she thinks she wants, but she still gets to travel because she travels a lot for work. The travel's not on her terms, and she only gets to kind of steal moments here and there to explore when she's on these business trips, but it's secure. And she's also like kind of really doesn't like her job, but she's like, you know what, it's fine, it's safe, and I still get to travel. So she finally, after working for a couple of years at this job, she finally decides to take some time off that's not work related. She just takes this girls' trip to Hong Kong with her best friend, and then on the second day there, her best friend just abandons her. She's like, I miss my boyfriend, I'm gonna go home, and I'm sorry. So Sophie's kind of used to traveling by herself. You know, she's upset that her friend left her, but she's used to traveling by herself. So she says, you know what, I'm just good. This is my vacation. I'm just going to stay and enjoy it. And then she meets Carson, who is this carefree American artist who's bumming around Asia. She's got no schedule, no budget. He's blowing through his trust fund. She thinks to hang out and sketch. You know, he's a sketch artist, and he wanders around these foreign cities just kind of aimlessly exploring. And that's very unlike Sophie, because Sophie, when she travels, she's always got a guidebook and an itinerary. She knows she's got her schedule planned down to the hour because that's just who she is. But, you know, she kind of falls in love with Carson. You know, he's traveling the world on his own terms, and it's kind of like, you know, this carefree artist. It's not something that she would want, you know, in her real life. But it's, you know, it's kind of sexy on vacation, and she figures, oh, well, she's going to leave him. So she winds up embarking on this very exciting whirlwind romance with him. And she figures, you know, it's okay because she's on vacation, and she has these very strict lines drawn between her vacation and her quote-unquote real life, like whatever happens on vacation stays on vacation kind of thing. But after a few days together, they start really falling for each other. And because she's kind of let her defenses down, and she threw her guidebook away, she's allowed herself to have these spontaneous experiences. Like, she's really fallen hard. And partway through the trip, they go on this impromptu trip to Macau. That, you know, they leave Hong Kong. She had been planning to stay in Hong Kong, but he invited her to Macau, so she just goes along. And then while they're there, he asks her to stay with him and to travel the world. He's like, abandon your life in New York. He's like, you know, I know you hate your job, because she's finally kind of admitting that she doesn't like her job, like what she's doing. So he says, you know, just come with me, come travel with me. It'll be everything you want to do. It's going to be amazing. And this is a moment where she just starts to question, like, maybe this plan that she had in her life isn't what she wants. But she's really tied to her plan and her 5-year plan and her need for stability. But at this point, her lines between vacation and real life begin to blur. And so that's a good setup for the story, I think. I don't want to give too much away.
No, you don't. It definitely takes a turn from there, yeah. So people have to tune in, or they have to read the book to find out what happens next.
As always, I hate to interrupt the interview, but we do have to take our first break of the podcast. When we come back, we'll be talking with Kristin about some of the more autobiographical portions of the book. So stay tuned, and we will be right back.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast. We are talking in this episode with author Kristin Rockaway, author of The Wild Woman's Guide to Traveling the World. And as I mentioned before the break, we're going to start talking a little bit about some of the more autobiographical elements of the book. So let's get back to the interview.
So I know that from doing a little bit of reading that there's some autobiographical elements in this story. I mean, for instance, Sophie works, at least when she's not traveling, she works in New York, and you are from the New York area. Is there anything else autobiographical in the book?
Well, there's a lot that's autobiographical. I mean, the whole notion of, needing stability and like putting off your passion for this, this plan and this safety, that's kind of my life. Like, I kind of put aside writing to be this, computer programming. It's pretty safe and pretty stable and pretty lucrative. So I really faced a lot of these same struggles that Sophie faced in her life with regard to like doing what you love versus doing what's like right, and like the need to please other people and versus following your dreams. And on a more specific note, there is something very real world that inspired the first the first scene in this book, which is that I was abandoned on a vacation by
oh no,
one of my girlfriends. Yes, when I was Sophie's age, when I was 24, I went to Spain on a girls' trip with a friend, and she just missed her boy. Like I remember us going down the runway on JFK, like headed to Madrid, and she was telling me, like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to last all 10 days because I really miss my boyfriend. And I'm like, oh God. And then we got there, and like as soon as we got there, she booked a plane ticket home.
Oh no.
It wound up being fine. I had a great time. I traveled by myself. I was kind of part of like a loose tour group, sort of. So it wound up being fun, and I met people and had a great time. But that was sort of the inspiration for the inciting incident of this book.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So, did you have an adventure like Sophie had, or was yours a little less?
I did have a romance, but it was nothing like what happened with Sophie. It was very much there were some lines, very strict lines drawn between real life and vacation there. So
right.
I'll leave it at that.
Not gonna pry, yeah. So the book is fun. I use the term beach reading, not as kind of, some people take that as a little bit of a derogatory term, but for me, I use it as something really fun to read on vacation, because this is, that to me would be just a great, like, it's one of those lose yourself in the adventure book.
Oh, I mean, I love the term beach read. I don't think that it's derogatory at all. I think it's good. That was my goal in all of this, to write this sort of quick bit of escapism, there's so much going on in the world right now. Like, there's a lot that's weighing on everybody really heavily. And it's nice to just lose yourself in a fictional story that transports you to another place. I really feel like the cities of Hong Kong and New York are characters in this book in a way. And my goal is to, if I did my job correctly, that if you're reading this book, you'll feel like you're there. You're with Sophie and Carson on Victoria Peak, looking out at the beautiful view, of Hong Kong, or you're, walking the streets of New York with Sophie. I also think that it's not so much like, we do read stories to escape, but there's this fantastic writing coach. She's written a couple of wonderful books. Her name is Lisa Cron, and I've gone to a couple of her workshops and read both of her books, Story Genius and Wired for Story. She's amazing. And she kind of talks about the brain science behind story, right? And she kind of argues that we don't really turn to story. I think she says we don't turn to story to escape reality. We turn to it to navigate reality. And I think that you could say, like, okay, well, this is, it's a lighthearted story, and it's in some ways it's kind of unrealistic, right? Because it's so it's like this idealistic, fun thing. But in a way, I feel like I would love for this to get people thinking too, and just feel a little inspired. Maybe ask yourself, what have you been doing in your life? How do you define success? Maybe I'm not advocating for anyone to chuck it all, abandon your life. You want to be responsible here, but I think there's some room for just every once in a while. It's good to stop and reevaluate and think about why you're doing what you're doing, as opposed to just operating on autopilot. Being intentional and thinking about what you really want from your life, and if what you're doing is making you happy and getting you to a place where you want to be.
That's a really good point, because it's not just Sophie who has that moment. There are other characters in the book who, to various degrees, go through that and kind of reevaluate some things and make those choices. Yeah,
exactly. Carson too. I feel like they're kind of on this journey together. They're total opposites, but it's kind of a romance trope, right? The opposites attract, and they find what they need in each other. They challenge each other's assumptions about their life.
I read on the back of the book that it's compared to the writings of Sophie Kinsella, as well as, it said if you love Sophie Kinsella and you love The Devil Wears Prada, then you should read this book. is that an author and a book that you've read that you've enjoyed, or were you shooting for something along those lines, or was it just?
Yeah, I mean, I was thrilled. Like, those were my publishers' comparables that they came up with, and I was like, oh, that makes me feel really good because they're amazing. Yeah. Sophie Kinsella is one of my favorite authors. I think she does romantic comedy like no other. Her voice is incredible. Mm-hmm. You could read a page, like a random page, and know that it's her. I think that's author goals right there, having that strong of a voice. And she talk about escapism. I mean, you can just escape into one of her books and just you just have a smile on your face. But it's light reading in that it makes you feel good, but it also makes you think too as well. All of the heroines are going through some transformative point in their lives where they're forced to face something. They're on the verge of something, right? Right. I think that's kind of a description of, right, like chick lit. Chick lit it's always been my favorite genre, and I know that's a bit of a controversial term in the same sense that beach read is, right? Because some people use it derisively, and it's also it's kind of fallen out of favor in some sense in publishing. But it's still around. They just don't use that term as much, and I actually find the term chick lit to be kind of empowering because it describes, this fun, smart story. These women who are smart and exploring themselves, and they're exploring how they change through their career, through romance, through friendships, through the shifting roles within their families, So I really aspired to be be in chick lit. So I'm very happy to be kind of categorized in that genre.
I agree, and I appreciate your take on it, because I think when people sometimes throw out that term chick lit, it's just like it's about just women's lives, and they say it like that, like women's lives are somehow less, and yet it's
like it's about shoes. Shoes and martinis and just, but it's okay. Yeah, I like shoes. Look, I like shoes. I have a very nice shoe collection in my closet, but I'm a lot more than that, and every woman.
Exactly. But, so maybe they're shopping for shoes, but they're also talking about, their life and their careers and their choices. And
exactly. They're climbing the ladder in their, in their shoes. They're climbing the ladder in their fancy shoes.
What's next for you? Are you working on anything right now?
Yeah. I mean, I'm always writing, always working on stuff. Working on a couple of things. I mean, I'm constantly chasing plot bunnies. This is my problem. I'll start working on something and be like, oh, shiny idea over here. But since I worked in IT for so long, I really like to explore that theme of women working in tech, because there aren't very many of us. I mean, I'm not really working in it anymore. I still do a little bit of it, a little bit of consulting work, but not much. But, I'll still always consider myself, a computer programmer, because it's just was so much of my life. And I read this statistic earlier today, actually, that it's 0.4% of teen girls plan to major in computer science, and only 6.7% of women graduate with a STEM degree, which is crazy to me. Like, how, I mean, I know, because I went through it, right? Like, I was one of only a handful of women sitting in a big lecture hall, and I was an IT manager, and I had 10 men working under me. I was the only, woman in my team. But it's still sort of shocking. And when I like to address, because when you read chick lit, for example, I feel like most of the heroines, they're working in marketing or publishing or fashion or other sort of traditional woman jobs. And not that those aren't stressful and important jobs, but there's just this sort of lack of representation of women that are working in tech. I kind of would like to address that, and because whenever I would read these, I would never saw a woman like me working in these kind of male dominated jobs. So I like to address that, but obviously in a lighthearted way. Writing fun, sexy, escapist stories for the STEM crowd.
So I do have to jump in one more time so we can take our second break. When we come back, we'll be talking more with Kristin Rockaway about her book, Wild Woman's Guide to Traveling the World. And we'll talk more about her writing style, her writing schedule, what she has coming up next, etc. So stay tuned, and we will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be, visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast. We are speaking with author Kristin Rockaway, and as we conclude this episode, we'll be talking more about Kristin's writing style, her writing schedule, her favorite authors and genres, etc. So let's get back to the interview.
So do you have anything that, this book's just coming out, so it comes out officially June 6th, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Few short days.
Yeah, that's so exciting. Do you have anything planned for the launch or anything?
Yeah, so next week I'm actually reading on my launch day, on release day at Warwick's, which is like the oldest independent bookshop in San Diego. Like, I can't believe I'm reading there. I'm really excited. So we're doing a signing, and then a couple of days later I'm having a launch party at a local travel agency, Carefree Vacations. That'll be fun. If anyone's in San Diego, come on down. And then I'll be at the Rip Bodice a couple of days after that in LA. I don't know if you've heard of the Rip Bodice. They're
awesome
the nation's
name.
Yeah, they're the nation's only romance bookstore. So I'm really excited that I'm hosting a trivia night there. So I'm super excited about that.
Oh, fun.
So I got a couple of local events.
Do you think you will ever return to Sophie as a character?
Maybe. I feel like Sophie's story, I kind of wrapped up her story right now, and she's not talking to me. Elena, on the other hand, I feel like she's got some unresolved issues. So I'm thinking about it.
I was wondering what happened to her. I kept thinking maybe we were going to get, because we got a little glimpse of Sophie's grandma and what does at the end of the book, but we didn't get much of Elena, so that would be intriguing.
She's still kind of kicking around in my head, talking to me, but I haven't really I haven't explored it yet.
Right. Okay. That sounds exciting. So talk to us about your writing. Do you have a schedule? Do you have a favorite place to write? I mean, I know you have a 4-year-old, so that can make things a little more challenging, but
yeah. So I have an office at home. I mostly work at home. I have a co-working space that I work at sometimes when, my son's at home and I can't get anything done. So I tend to just work in my office, and I've sort of trained my mind that, like, when I sit in that chair, it's writing mode, so that's it's almost like this instant response. And I try to keep to a schedule, but, obviously with family, that can be super tough. So I really try to focus on being flexible, because before I would try to be very rigid about it, and when it didn't work out, then I would just fall apart and be like, oh God, I can never, I'm never going to be able to stick to this plan. And I would just get very upset. So I just try to stay flexible. I'm not one of these people that can write, like, first get up at 4 a.m. and write. I've tried that too, but I'm not a morning person. I can't function until I've had like 2 cups of coffee. And then my body just sort of shuts down at 10 p.m. So I'm not a night owl either. So I really have to get my work done during the day. So when my son is at school, I try and just cram most everything into those daylight hours when he's not around.
Does he ever inspire your writing in any ways?
Not really. I tend to write about, like, the single woman. I haven't really been inspired to write about any kind of family, drama yet, or family even stuff, but maybe eventually one day I will.
Switching from writing to reading, do you have favorite genres or authors?
Well, like I said, chick lit's my favorite, and I love Sophie Kinsella. But I also enjoy like the broader genre of women's fiction and romance. I love Emily Giffin. I like how she takes, these common tropes and sort of turns them on their head. I like Karma Brown, and she just had a book come out, I think 2 days ago in this moment. But I love Come Away With Me. Her debut was amazing. It was about a sort of a travel story as well. Carrie Lonsdale.
She's a blurb in the front of your book, right?
Yes, she does. And I can't believe that she blurred my book. It was just like a dream come true, like Karma Brown. My book. Yeah, Carrie Lonsdale as well. She blurred my book. It was another like dream that like she blurbed it. There's a debut, like I'm part of a debut group this year. Some other authors who are debuting this year, we just kind of all get together and offer each other moral support and answer each other's questions. And there's a debut author in my group, Marianne Marlowe, who wrote Some Kind of Magic. That book was amazing, like a romance kind of chick lady book. And then I also really like some historical romance, which I'm not much of a historical fiction reader, but there are some historical romance authors like Tessa Dare. Oh, I love Tessa Dare and Sarah McLean. Yeah, I mean, I could go on forever about reading.
I could too. I totally understand.
Yeah.
Kind of a topic that came up last week when I was speaking with Jasmine Silvera. We talked about what she reads with her 2-year-old. So is there anything that you read with your 4-year-old that you love or hate? To read over and over?
Oh, well, so my son is obsessed with trucks and trains and essentially like anything with like 2 to 4 wheels and a motor. So whenever we go to the library, there's like a bin of books toward the front, with different themes, and there's a themed things that go section. And so whenever we go, he just runs straight for that and pulls out basically every book. So I know more about like construction vehicles and trains and airplanes, and I know so much about this. Like we'll be at a construction site and I'll be like, oh no, that's not an excavator, that is a backhoe. Like I know all the differences between them. So I'm feeling like this is like taking up so much space in my brain. I need to write a book where the hero or the heroine, like one of them is like a construction site worker, because I need to use this knowledge.
As we are wrapping up a little bit, is there anything else that you would like people to know about you or your books or anything coming up?
I was just kind of going to talk about how I like, that we live in like this sort of troubling time, and my book offers this temporary escape. And, if you're looking for a laugh and a positive sort of uplifting story, then this is for you. Just take a few minutes out of your real world to just sort of indulge in a little escapism, and hopefully find a little inspiration. I'd love for people to take away from this book that, they're inspired to maybe follow their dreams or abandon some plans that they've had. And, because life can take an unexpected turn when you least expect it. Something unexpected can happen, even when everything looks sort of bleak. I hope everybody likes it.
Well, everyone should go and pick it up because it is a fabulous summer read. I know you're on social media. Do you want to tell people where they can find you and follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm probably most active on Twitter or on Instagram. I'm not much of a picture taker, but I'm getting the hang of it with Instagram. I'll find things like, oh, that's Instagrammable. So I'm getting more active there. And it's my handles are just Kristin Rockaway, Kristin. I have my website at KristinRockaway.com. You can sign up for my newsletter and keep on top of any, I barely send it out, but, I have these things coming up next week. I'll let you know about them. And then there's some stuff later on in the summer. I'll be attending a couple of festivals and conferences. So sign up there. And yeah, and I love to get mail. I love to get mail from readers, and, I love to attend, little book clubs. I'll even Skype into your book club. So send me an email. My email is on my website, but it's also Kristin at KristinRockaway.com, and I'd be happy to talk.
Yeah, and there's actually a reader's guide at the end of this book.
Yes, there is. And you can access that on my website as well.
Oh, okay. Did you contribute to that, or was that your publisher who put that
Oh,
together?
I did. Yeah, no, I wrote that. I didn't realize that, like, a lot of times you're just writing your own reading group guide. That was things I've learned in the publishing, right? Like, I wrote those all myself.
I think we've pretty much covered everything, unless there's something that you can think of.
That's it. Thank you so much, Sarah, for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I loved the book, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with next. And, you know, no rush, no pressure. But
yeah, me too. I'd like to see what I come up with next too.
I mean, you know, this one's not even out yet, and I'm like, come on, what are you going to do next? So again, the book, Wild Woman's Guide to Traveling the World, comes out June 6th. So you should definitely check it out. And if you're in the San Diego area, you should go and meet Kristin and maybe get a signed copy of the book.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Thanks again.
Once again, I want to thank author Kristin Rockaway, author of The Wild Woman's Guide to Traveling the World, for joining me today for this conversation. I really enjoyed the book, as I said, and I really enjoyed speaking with Kristin. She is fun, as you can hear. She is engaging, and the book is the same. So I highly recommend that you go out and pick it up, The Wild Woman's Guide to Traveling the World. If you're in the San Diego area next week, the book comes out, and Kristin will be at those locations that she mentioned during the interview, so you can go hear her read, get a signed copy, etc. As always, I want to thank you so much for joining me. I hope you'll join me again next week when we will be talking about some more of my favorite authors from childhood. Reading this book and speaking with Kristin today made me think, of course, about New York, and one of my favorite books that is set in New York, and that is a book by author E.L. Konigsberg. So I hope you'll join me as we discuss author E.L. Konigsberg and some of her books that were favorites of mine as a child. As always, you can find all of our podcasts at www.gsmcpodcast.com. You can download those podcasts on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, any of the apps that you use for your mobile devices. And in addition to following Kristin on social media, you could follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, and Facebook, GSMC Book Review. I would love to hear your thoughts. I would love to hear your favorite authors, your favorite genres, etc. So come find me on social media and leave me a comment. Again, thank you so much for joining me. Join me again next week. I hope you'll join me again next week. But in the meantime, what I really hope is that you will go get yourself lost in a good book. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.